All right, let's dive right in. We're going to talk about psychoeducational assessment, which is really just a formal way of understanding how a child thinks, learns, and feels. And look, if you think one single test can map out a kid's entire future, well, stick around. In this explainer, we're going to break down what a real assessment is all about, using the gold standard from the American Psychological Association. Let's get to it.
So let's start with this question, because it gets right to the heart of a really common and honestly a dangerous myth. Can one test, just one score from one particular day, really predict a child's whole life? You know, the idea is tempting, right? Because it's simple. But it is a massive oversimplification. And today, we're going to see exactly why. Okay, first things first, we need to get one thing straight. There's a huge difference between testing a child and assessing them. I know they might sound like the same thing, but in the world of psychology and education, they are worlds apart, and they lead to totally different outcomes. The slide breaks it down perfectly. See, a test is just one tool in the toolbox. It gives you a single piece of data, kind of like using a ruler to measure height. That's it. But an assessment, that's the entire project. It's the whole systematic process of using all the tools you have to see the whole person, to connect the dots, and to make a truly informed decision. Think of it like this. A test is just a snapshot, but a real assessment, that's the whole photo album. So what does a proper assessment actually look like? What's involved? Well, to figure that out, we're going to turn to the experts, the American Psychological Association, or the APA. They've set the standard for this process for a very, very good reason: to protect kids from the harm of being misunderstood. The key words there are systematic process. This is not a one-and-done event. It's a carefully planned mission to collect, integrate, and interpret all kinds of information. It's all about putting all these different puzzle pieces together until you can finally see the complete picture of who this child is. And here's the ultimate goal of that whole process. It's not about slapping a label on a kid or boiling them down to a number. Not at all. It's about gathering info from everyone: teachers, parents, the child themselves, and through observations and tests. Then you put it all together and interpret that full picture to make the best possible decision for that child's well-being. The real goal is genuine understanding, not just a score. Now, to make sure this whole complex process is done right, the APA has laid out two core principles. I want you to think of these as the two golden rules for any good, responsible assessment. Let's start with number one. All right, principle number one. This is all about avoiding the trap of putting all your eggs in one basket. This is absolutely critical. A single test score, one observation in a classroom, or one report from one person, it's never enough. Making a huge decision about a child's education or their future based on one tiny piece of data isn't just risky, it's just flat out unprofessional. A proper assessment demands a 360-degree view. And the second principle is just as crucial. It really all comes down to one simple word: context. And honestly, this is a total game changer. A test result or a certain behavior can mean completely different things for different kids. Think about it. Is a child struggling because of a learning disability, or because they're still learning English after moving from another country? Is a behavior a symptom of a disorder, or is it a totally normal reaction to a stressful situation at home? Context is everything. Okay, this next part is huge, because this isn't just about following a set of technical guidelines. Getting an assessment right is a profound ethical responsibility, because the stakes for the child are unbelievably high. The APA is crystal clear on this. Ethics aren't an add-on, they are the absolute core of the entire process. This means making sure the professional is actually qualified, getting informed consent from parents, and protecting the child's privacy. It's all about making sure the child is safe from the potential harm of being misunderstood. And let's be really blunt about what's at stake here. A wrong diagnosis isn't just some clerical error you can fix later. It's an ethical failure that can send a child down the completely wrong path, damaging their self-esteem, their education, and their future for years, maybe even a lifetime. Getting this right truly matters. So you can see how this all comes together in the real world. Let's look at a quick case study. This is a perfect example of how following these principles can stop a misdiagnosis in its tracks and lead to some genuinely helpful support for a child. So let's meet KM. He's 9 years old, and to his parents and his teachers, he is a complete puzzle. They're worried, they're confused, and you are about to see exactly why. Okay, now take a look at this. On the one hand, KM is incredibly bright. He picks things up really fast, no trouble with his schoolwork at all. But On the other hand, his behavior is a huge challenge. He's impulsive, he gets angry at the drop of a hat, he really struggles with social cues, and he has no friends. It's a total contradiction. So what is really going on here?
So I want you to just think for a second. If all you saw was that right-hand column, the impulsive, angry behavior, what would you assume? What label would you be tempted to slap on him?
Yeah, he'd probably get labeled a troublemaker or maybe get a quick diagnosis of ADHD. He might even be treated like he's just a discipline problem that needs to be managed. But all of these labels, because they're based only on what you can see on the surface, would completely miss the real issue. They focus on the symptom and they totally ignore the root cause.
But a comprehensive assessment, one that looked at everything from his cognitive skills to how he communicates, it revealed the true story. KM's behavior wasn't about defiance. It was the direct result of a major struggle with social communication. It wasn't that he didn't want to connect with other kids. It's that he just didn't know how. And this slide just perfectly captures the two roads you could go down. The wrong path, focusing only on his behavior, it just leads to punishment and labels that don't help anyone. The child just keeps struggling. But the right path, the one guided by a proper assessment, aims to understand the whole child. And that leads to targeted support for what he actually needs. In this case, help with social skills, and gives him the tools to finally succeed. And that brings us to the final critical piece of the puzzle, the recommendation. I mean, after all the information is gathered and analyzed, what's the actual plan? Because even the most brilliant assessment is totally useless if it leads to a bad recommendation. The absolute worst recommendations are the ones that are just completely useless in the real world. They're so vague, like, give the child more support. What does that even mean? Or they're totally impossible for a teacher with 30 other kids to actually do. And most importantly, they often completely ignore the child's strengths. A good recommendation is practical, it's personalized, and it builds on what the child can already do. That's the real finish line. So, let's end with this thought. A real assessment should never ever be just a number. It's a story. It's the story of a child's strengths, their challenges, and their unique way of seeing the world. And the question for all of us, for educators, clinicians, and parents, is this: what kind of story are we going to tell?